to introduce them. Please welcome the visionary founder of Ethereum, Ms. Vitaly Buterin. Joining him is Mr. Dong Cao, CEO of Light Network, a driving force in decentralized science space, and our moderator, Mr. KB Potter, CEO of KDA Capabilities, who brings a well experience of facilitating our explorations. Let's dive into this question, and the stage is yours.
Wow. Really great to hear from Tim and Sonia before. That was so awesome. Hear what they're talking about in terms of privacy and things that we should be thinking about in terms of groups. I wanted to just say that I'm excited to be here for us to hear from Vitalik, of course, on decentralized science. And let me just ask you a question. All of us use DeFi, right? We're all in DeFi. But how many of us are using DeSci? Anyone raise their hand on decentralized science? Engaged? Involved? Okay, I think we better explain what this is all about, right? As well. So you're going to pick up what's that about? What are we doing in decentralized science? What's the future look like? And how can you be involved in it as well? So I can say that we're joined here by Vitalik. Can everyone give a round of applause for Vitalik being here today? Thank you for supporting the community. And I'm joined here with Tuan Chao, great friend and also leader of Genetica. And Genetica has been run by Tuan for the past 7 years of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears on putting the genetic code onto blockchain. They also started the first clean certified lab here in Vietnam that does genetic research certified by US. And also, in spite of all this, he has time for family. That means a lot to me as well. So let's give Tuan a round of applause too for being up here. And I'm Keith Carter. I was a professor at National University of Singapore, where we looked at how we can bring together fintech and people. I said, how many taxi drivers on the way here would have said, hey, I'm bringing my son to eat Vietnam? Right? So we need to improve and get to share with everyone what fintech is about, what Ethereum is about, and what more we can do. I also work on the Bretton Woods Committee out of Washington, D.C., where we look at policy and financial services, and DEC Institute out of Zurich, where we look to help standardize for how you do programming. But let's get right into DeFi and DeSci and what's it all about. So, Vitalik, can you share a little bit your definition of what decentralized science means and what we can use it for?
I think decentralized science is a very big label that covers potentially a lot of different things, right? And I mean, depending on how you define it, like, you can define it in a way that focuses on the blockchain parts, but like decentralization is bigger than blockchains too, right? So you could even ask, like, does Wikipedia count as a DeSci project, right? And maybe it does. So I think within our community, there have been this collection of people that have been basically trying to ask, with the tools that we're working on, whether it's blockchains or DAOs or CPA or whatever else, are there ways to try to apply some of those technologies, and at the same time our community is to really try to push forward different kinds of science that we care about. So, I mean, just like using coins to fund science is, it's a thing, that's been, I think, done for about, like, basically over 10 years now. I mean, I've definitely donated coins to science myself, and there have been coins and there have been NFTs and some more things like that, and just groups of people organizing to fund things. Then we can talk about using some of the cryptographic tools that we have to try to collect data, which is very important for a lot of medical things, but in ways that protects our privacy. And so I talked about some of that yesterday, and I know that there's projects already working on that. We could talk about like DAOs, which have been a mechanism lots of people have been experimenting with as a way of organizing people. Initially organizing people to invest together, but I think now over time also organizing people to do things together. There are projects like there's VitaDAO, and there's an increasing number of these, basically trying to organize around supporting particular types of science, organizing around supporting trials, organizing around like specific treatments that they care about. So a lot of interesting work there. A lot of work on this public goods funding projects, right? So we've done things like Gitcoin grants, optimism funding, with all of these public good, decentralized public goods funding technologies that we've developed for use inside of the Ethereum ecosystem that are often very valuable to the ecosystems doing science as well. So to me, like all of these things count as design. It's if like anything that just helps empower communities to work together to support science that they care about without everything having to be rather through a centralized corporation. I think counts as design to me.
Less centralized thinking, less single threading, funding, being able to open up to more communities. That's part of the things that you've shared around decentralized science.
Yes.
And let me turn over to Tuan. Share your definition, what it's all about.
So first of all, thank you, Vitalik, for coming here and talk about decentralized science. So I think one of my main objectives before I give the definition, my own definition of decentralized science, I would say that the keynote Vitalik gave yesterday is awesome. I would love to see the next keynote Vitalik give in AI and blockchain. Then Vitalik will actually give more example AI in decentralized science. Please. Yeah. We will discuss today. Okay. So another way to define decentralized science, let's move back one step. So we've been working in science, like centralized science, for many years before we actually started the decentralized science. Okay, and then we can hear a lot of extremists in decentralized science is saying that, okay, decentralized science will replace science at some day. So I would love to share some of my view on that first, and then we can continue for the discussion. Yeah. So I consider centralized science is still doing okay. It's like the Apple iOS, right? It beautifully controlled by a monopoly, but it's still working. Okay? And then I consider decentralized science is like Android. Okay, so the moment Google published Android to the world, there's so many different developers can actually develop application on top of Android. So that's why we have like more Samsung phone and many other phone and operating system, not just iPhone. And I think that centralized science and decentralized science can grow one side by side with each other. And we can move to any other example later. Yeah, thank you.
So having decentralized science and science work together, work side by side. You see an ecosystem where they are collaborative?
Yes. Yeah. So, for example, a lot of like in science, a lot of research is happening right now in university or like big corporate. But the moment we see that the definition of like decentralized science or decentralization is just basically put user in control. And so right now, a lot of research institute or university or big corporate are actually actively doing that. More engagement.
Talking about engagement, he said that getting the corporates involved. Let's talk a little bit about the financial aspect too. You mentioned that sometimes a science project, especially outside of the major mainstream, is hard to get funding for, hard to get data as well. In today's context, what could you look at as a decentralized project? Like, what's the framework we should think is a practical decentralized project that someone could be working on?
There's a couple of different patterns that make sense, right? And so, like one of them is just at least kind of taking a lot of therapies, treatments, or ideas for treatments kind of over the hump from the beginning stages, where like often we have pretty good tools for funding people or encouraging people to work on them already, and the end stages where it can just be taken over and pushed forward by a private market. Like I think in between the two, there is often this challenging area that a lot of projects, actually not even just in things like biology, I think in a lot of areas, and even including Ethereum as well, have a hard time getting over. And trying to organize together as a community to push projects through that, I think is really the key, right? And so the question is what kind of organizing do you need, right? And so one area is always bringing together funding, right? There's this is a pattern that exists in Ethereum too, right? Like if you need $100,000 and have a good idea, there's lots of people that will just give it to you. But a lot of the time, when version 1 of a thing takes $100,000, there's always the version 2 that we need to bring into the real world, and that often takes $100 million, right? And where does that come from, right? And that individual altruists are generally they can get you to 100K, but they can't take you to the tens of millions. And having communities come together and pool that kind of funding. We've seen examples of this even in the crypto space. So even just fun things like Constitution DAO, right? That got up over 40 million, right? So actually bringing funds together to support drug treatments on that scale is one activity. Another one is another dimension is number of users, right? There's so much that you can do with just working with just yourself and 500 people, and there's more that you can do if you actually have a sizable community that can try things and give you more information. And so there's been a lot of excitement around decentralized trials, and that's something that can be done as I mentioned yesterday, there's very low risk versions of this, assign people to randomly try different lifestyle changes, and then either you don't even need to get them to manually report information, you could get a smartwatch app and just pass that information over automatically. And so doing more of those kinds of things.
So making it accessible, like a smartwatch app makes it really easy to
Exactly.
play it, to work in this place.
Exactly. Make it really easy to participate, just as someone doing some small experiment in contributing data, and then use things like DAOs and other tools to actually organize together large groups of people. And you could even have a mechanism where people can first express interest, and only if enough people express interest, then a switch automatically turns on, and some group of people get funded and something starts, right? So it feels like that, and then if you can get do one of these medium scale things to get medium scale data about some kind of treatment or lifestyle change or technology, then that by itself is often enough to get it to the point where either private markets or mainstream scientific research bodies can keep pushing it from there.
So you're also bringing together mainstream, trying to supporting these things. Like Pfizer made an investment in decentralized science back last year, for example. Playing part of it as well as you have Twine. So take me a little bit into the biological side of this. Talk about biology experiments. Sensitivity in terms of medical records is so high, and yet during COVID, every government around the world asked us for our very sensitive data to come into their countries, right? And it wasn't yet on blockchain and what have you. How can decentralized science kind of help us with the privacy aspect, as well as be a useful way to support experiments like Vitalik was just talking about?
So that's a very nice question, but before that, let me give Vitalik an example. Okay, because Vitalik asked, give me an example right now. So you are now here in Vietnam, 3 months ago, we published the largest genetic study for autism for the Southeast Asian population. Let me explain how we did it. So we, for 5-6 years right now, we build what we call the Life Network. I can explain it in more detail later. But we have more than 100,000 users actually participate into this our user. So for the autism research, we partner with a central hospital here in Vietnam. Okay, we do a research with them. They give us 300 samples for the autistic children, and then based on that sample, we actually characterize the criteria who is qualified to participate in the research, and then we send that request to hundreds of thousands of our users, asking, do you satisfy this criteria? We incentivize them to do, you join us, you participate, you get the reward, okay? And immediately, 20,000 people get back. And only 5,000 people actually satisfy the criteria. We use that 5,000 sample. We actually did a study, and it's the largest genetic study for autism for Southeast Asian population. Our chief scientist sitting right there, who've been working on that for like 3 years, and basically not only in autism, in Asia we can do a lot of any other research which was only like mostly done by the US or the UK by the Westerner. So right now we do a lot of things for the Asians. You can see diabetes, okay? In the US, a little bit obvious, there may be diabetes. If you come to Asia, you see a lot of thin people are diabetics. So right now we're also running one of the largest genetic study in diabetes. So to answer your question, we build a platform to what people participate to earn. Okay, you can participate in one of the research and you earn the reward. So that was trying to give Vitalik some example. So next time we talk about AI and blockchain, probably if you can mention something to help the Asian population to advance the research. It's the research mostly done in the US. So our team actually based in the US from Cornell University, from UCSF, from Stanford and Harvard Medical School. And when we came back here to Singapore and Vietnam, right, we see the huge opportunity for the Asian population to do advanced research. And decentralized science is a mechanism for us to get that objective. Okay?
What do you think? Does that, what you just shared as an example, meet some of those framework tests that you put up on?
I think that's what it does.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything that would make this, because we talked about an audience, there's a kind of, I feel, a disconnect. In 3 years, you've been working through on this great experiment. It's been around, decentralized health has so many opportunities, and yet the audience here didn't really say, hey, I've been involved in it. How can we bring this closer together? How can people know what it is, get the benefits out of it? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think,
And support.
yeah, I think like one part of the answer just is that like we have to be okay that these things are going to take some amount of time, right? Like if you remember zero knowledge proofs, right? Like who here has made a zero knowledge proof in the past year, right? Like used an application that involves eBay-Snark somewhere. Now, who here did that more than 5 years ago? I think I did. I think I sent it to this transaction, right? But basically no, right? So, like even when you have things that are like in the world of ideas, like often things take time to really start intersecting, right? And a lot of people are like the kinds of people that come from the mindset of very actively thinking about biology, medicine, and health, and the kinds of people who naturally think about software and cryptography. Like those are very specific groups of people, right? And then the intersection of those two is an even more significant group of people. Or even more specific group of people. Very, very significant. So I think just having these kinds of events and just like activities that just like try to intentionally bring the groups together more and help them understand each other is one of those things that needs to happen. Like, I mean, I don't think there is no easy solution. I just think there's lots of people talking to each other.
And I like that, the intentionality to really share what people learn here today, take it back, try it out as well, see what's it about, try to get a framework together, and look at the current projects that are in D-Science as well. Let's take it a little bit further. You mentioned AI and genetics. How can AI, blockchain, sit together, work together? What can we see and think about for the future of decentralized science with AI and blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, the most natural one that comes to mind is like finding like ways to encourage people to provide like data that has to do with you know, like either specific conditions or like for specific groups of people, like data that's otherwise not easy to find that is necessary for training models. Yeah.
For AI, I think I can talk a lot, but 30 minutes is not enough. I give you a couple of examples, okay? Love to give example. So in AI, right now, because the amount of data we need for training, right? The amount of data belong to the user. So AI is one of the mechanisms to apply to build what we call the autonomous agent, right? To protect the privacy of the data and to respect the ownership of the data, the AI can work as autonomous agent, so nobody will actually access to the data. ZK-proof work really well if we can make it work with AI. Another way, when we talk about data, okay? We've been working on, by the way, one of the background. When I was at Google, I was in a team we built the largest global distributed database of the world. Right now, it's a database was actually under the Google Cloud. Okay, and so the way we look at the data, the way we use the data for training, and the most important thing is clean data. So Andrew Ng, the founder of Google DeepMind, said that 80% of the time an AI company actually spends is to clean the data. So that's why the way we can have to build a system so that when we bring the data in, we need a very early way to clean up the data, and the AI can actually work a lot better than human. Okay, so I can give you many examples to see that how AI can actually involve in basically data cleaning, data curating, and actually labeling the data. Okay, so really hope that the next topic we can go in depth about AI in decentralized side.
What do you guys think about AI and using blockchain to protect the security of the training data? And so when I want to send sensitive data, either genetic data or critical financial records, from my data over into an AI, one thing about blockchain is that it's mutable. It's guaranteed delivery. It allows us to make sure that it actually gets there. It hasn't been changed. So perhaps, can blockchain act as a necessary feature, a required feature almost, to make sure that the training data we provide, like you were just saying, is actually getting into the AI and in a secure way?
Yeah, I mean, I think potentially very valuable, though the kind of security that people talk about when they talk about data is like it's not the same kind as the kind of security blockchains provide, right? Like when we talk about data, you know, we're worried about privacy, we're worried about the data not falling into the wrong hands. When we talk about blockchains, like blockchains are more about like, you know, like, hey, make sure that you know, if Microsoft or whoever else can't like go in and edit your spreadsheet, right? And like Microsoft not being able to edit your spreadsheet and Microsoft not being able to see your spreadsheet are different things, right? So in this case, I think some of the stuff around zero-knowledge proofs and combining zero-knowledge proofs with blockchains to get both kinds of guarantees at the same time. Also, MPC is a big one for training. I think could be super valuable. So yeah, like basically, I think like there definitely is this like space of like privacy preserving learning that AI researchers have definitely looked at, and there's cryptographic tools that can help it. I think those kinds of things are absolutely going to be important.
In genetic data, talk about that security.
So, for example, let me go a little bit in detail what Vitalik was talking about ZKP, because I've been a research on ZKP for some time right now. And one of the clear example, I always love to give example. So for example, an AI model, they say that, okay, they've been training on 1 million data records. There's no way to verify it. But if you apply ZKP and they say that, okay, this model, I'm going to publish this model, it will train on a 1 million genetic profile. Using ZKP, we can prove it. So that is one way to preserve the privacy, the data security of the user without actually revealing that data to the user of that AI model. Okay, so that is one example. Another example, when Vitalik was saying that, okay, how about the data, the privacy, and the ownership? So let me say this way, as a data person also, data is always encrypted. The data will belong to the true owner of that, what we call the data owner. The data owner holds the encryption key, and that is the only key to access to the data. Go to a more technical detail, any of the engineer in the audience can check like proxy re-encryption. That is one way for the data owner to approve that Vitalik can access my data. I give that approval for Vitalik without actually reviewing my private key for encryption of the data. And now Vitalik can read it, and we see all of the transactions on the blockchain to prove that I give approval to Vitalik. Vitalik can read the data without getting my private key. Okay, so all of this one also can use ZKP, or they can execute within a trusted execution environment. Yeah.
So if you look at it, that a trusted execution environment perhaps protects information. One of the critical issues that we have in scientific publishing is that failures aren't published. Can you share a little bit about this piece? Of how can decentralized science enable science to move even faster if we start to share those failures?